Another really important issue, and I raised it a couple of weeks ago, just at the end of the show, it isn't getting enough attention. The National Archives are pleading with the Morrison Government for some emergency funding to prevent the disintegration of thousands of precious written documents and records. The wartime speeches of John Curtin, the births, deaths and marriages register from Pitcairn Island, and the personnel files of World War II RAAF pilots are amongst all of these records at risk. Now, more than 150 eminent Australians have signed a letter calling for $67 million. That's all they want, $67 million in urgent funding. The man behind the letter, Emeritus Professor of History at Monash University, Graeme Davison, joins me now. Graeme, I think this is such an important issue. Explain for my viewers how dire the situation is at National Archives.
Well, as you say, Peter, as paper records are also in danger, but especially we're concerned about the film and audio recordings, which, of course, in their nature, decay very rapidly over time. So rapidly, in fact, that some of these records, which include, for example, records of the ceremonies of Aboriginal people, or recordings of language, recordings that show our Antarctic expeditions, a range of very valuable records may well be corrupted and become no longer retrievable in digital form as early as 2025. So it's really a very urgent question, and we're a little dismayed that the government overlooked this request, which was made as a result of a very important inquiry by a senior public servant about 18 months ago.
Yeah, look, it surprises me, A, because the quantum, I mean, $67 million is a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money in the context of the federal budget. And in the Howard years, I worked for two arts ministers, and the National Archives sat within those portfolios. And there was a huge understanding, at least then in government and the departments, about the sort of the treasure trove that National Archives has. And once this sort of material is lost, it's gone forever. What was the rationale or the reasoning that you got from government as to why this funding request was rejected?
Well, we're absolutely baffled, Peter, as to why it wasn't acceded to, because, as you say, at $67 million over 7 years, it's not even $67 million in a single year. So it's modest request for funding. It's true that the government has under review all of the results of that inquiry carried out by Mr. Tune. And some of those things are appropriately left for later. But I think it's the urgency of this particular issue that really needs to be addressed immediately.
Was this inquiry by David Tune, the former finance secretary? Is that what you
That's right. There? That's right. Who's a respected senior public servant. You may well know him.
Yes, do. Yeah, highly respected and coming out of the finance portfolio who doesn't waste money. So
no.
$70 million over a period of time would be money well spent. What would you do if that money was available? What would you spend it on?
Well, it'd be spent essentially in converting these records, which are in a fragile form, into digital form. And one of the things, of course, is that, ironically, I was on the Council of the National Archives quite some time ago. And at that time, the Australian Archives had the reputation internationally of being leaders in the whole process of adjusting to the digital revolution. So they've got the expertise, they've got the capacity, and they've got people on hand who can do this work. So it really, as far as I know, it really just requires the government to vote the funds. But sadly, things have been allowed now to depreciate at such a rate in the archives that their staffing has been reduced over the last decade by about 15%, and they simply haven't got the resources to do their normal work, let alone undertake this major project.
But I would suspect this would be one where you'd have to bring in, external expertise, perhaps a contract for someone or a team to come in and do the digitisation.
That's right.
Look, I know Josh Frydenberg, connection of his seat of Kooyong to the history of Robert Menzies. I know he very much cares about the preservation of history. Leave it with me. I might make a phone call. I don't say that I'm going to deliver any results, but I fear this has probably been missed. I hope it's just an oversight, and I hope it's something that we can get fixed sooner rather than later.
Well,
Graeme, thank you for your time. I really appreciate you.
Yes. Well, thank you very much, Peter. And I'm sure your influence among other people who've been concerned about this in recent days will really make a big difference. Thank you very much.